Hey, how's it going? So this is a video that is introducing the Book of Ecclesiasticus, which is the Wisdom of Sirach. So this is an introduction to the book. Before we even get into this book, we need an introduction. Or getting into the introduction is partially getting into the book, because knowing why it was made or how it came about is important to get the whole context of what's happening in the Bible, how to understand what's happening in the world and everything. So let's read the introduction, and then we'll go to the prologue, and then after that it's a wrap. That's the introduction, and it's very important for us to grasp the introduction of this book. So this is the only book in the Apocrypha to which the author's name has been attached, Jesus Ben Sirach, or Jesus the son of Sirach. Sirach, as he is more conveniently known, was a wisdom teacher who directed an academy in Jerusalem in which pupils were schooled in the very practical ethics and theology of Hebrew wisdom tradition. So he was in Jerusalem, he had a school, his name is Jesus, and he was teaching in wisdom, Hebrew wisdom, and the tradition of wisdom. In the prologue of this book, Sirach's grandson writes that Jesus ben Sirach had devoted his life to the study of the Hebrew scriptures and wrote this book to help people learn wisdom and live by its precepts. So quickly, I want us to look up this word, which is precepts. Precepts. So this book teaches precepts, borrowed from late praesatium from to teach, which is to teach, pray, and capio, to take. So when you have a precept, what you give, you learn. A teacher teaches so that you learn. So teaching is learning. A teacher teaches so that you learn. But while a teacher is teaching, he or she is learning, because you can only have the fruit from the seed. So what they give is what they get. So teaching is learning. Teaching is learning. And it's also earning, which is to take. So precepts is learning to earn. That's a precept. Learning to earn. So this book is about learning to earn. And this is when we get into the understanding of prophecy, which is profiting. Prophecy is profiting. So learning to earn is learning precepts that give you the prophecy to profit. So throughout this book, this is what it's all about. You're learning to earn. It'll give you gold. It'll earn you days on life, because time is money, right? So you say, like, wisdom owns the gold in one hand and time in the other. These are the hands of the time itself, existence, which is what we say time is money, right? This is what wisdom is. It's an investigation. It is investment. This is why you have to find the way to wisdom. In my previous video in the book of Baruch, I'm speaking on the part where Baruch is saying, who can find the way to wisdom? It's an investigation. You have to invest in it. So it comes in precepts. The book extends to 51 chapters and was written around 180 BC. That date can be closely approximated from the book's prologue, because Sirach's grandson 3 there states the year of the Egyptian ruler in which he translated the Hebrew text into Greek, shortly after 132 BC. There can be no doubt that this was originally written in Hebrew, since fragmentary manuscripts from Cairo and Qumran confirm this. In the time of Sirach, Jews living in Judea, Syria, and Egypt were inundated by the Greek culture and language that had been introduced throughout the Near East by Alexander the Great and maintained by his successors, the Seleucids in Syria and Ptolemies in Egypt, each contending for control of the Judean sites and trade routes. And trade leads to tradition, as we'll later on discover. So when they're speaking about this, I hope you got what it's saying. There can be no doubt that it was originally written in Hebrew, since the fragmentary manuscripts from Cairo in Qanam confirm this. All right, so they found this book written in Hebrew. They found other books, and this is written 132 BC before Christ. So these were the Jewish scriptures that they were reading, that they were writing, that they were digesting. But this happens to be the largest collection of wisdom literature that was known. And it came from Sirach, or Jesus. He's called Jesus, and we'll get into that name a little bit later on. And he was living in Egypt. And in that time, there were so many Jews in Egypt. This was not something that is shocking or is news. So in this time, in fact, when you look back into history, or recent history actually, in this time in particular, when the Greeks hadn't conquered the whole world, what was happening was, if you look at all of the African tribes and countries and nations, you'd see that there was a Jewish tribe. There were Jews all over Africa. So here is one example. Sirach is living in Egypt, and the time of the Egyptian ruler is spoken of, and also in the Apocrypha in general. This is when you hear about how the Greeks took over North Africa. And this is speaking about the times when Napoleon's influence was growing, and this is when we were taken into captivity. And this is the captivity of Egypt. So when you look at what happened with the Greeks, we're now speaking of what happened with the Romans. When we speak of what happened with the Romans, we're speaking of what is happening right now with the Americans, or with the English, or with the Dutch, or with the West. All right. So this is speaking about all of the Western civilizations as they came and enslaved the Jewish races. All right. So there can be no doubt it was originally written in Hebrew. So these people were writing in these languages, in these places. So this book was not found in Jerusalem. It was not translated there. It came out of Africa. It came out of Egypt, as a lot of apocryphal texts do come. That's why they're hidden texts. They're in the Apocrypha, because the African tint is so dark with them that if it was just in general canon, people would know exactly what's going on, and it wouldn't be babbling where we have two versions of the same thing, which is an image, which is an idol, which is idolatry, which is what we have to escape, which is what it is, and which is what they took over, and which is what's being used, which is what is Egypt. So when we look at the role of Alexander the Great, right, in conquering, and how his legacy is translated even in today, what we call democracy, is a Greek ethic that is being translated in American or Western terms. So when you look in Africa, there's so many Jewish tribes. This one is in Egypt. There were other tribes that were in West Africa, in places like Ghana and Nigeria. There were other Jewish tribes that were in Congo. In fact, the word from Congo is derived from the Hebrew. A lot of things are derived from the Hebrew. And this is, of course, when we speak of Babel, when everyone was speaking one language, that one language is definitely an African, an Afro-infused language, because this is where everyone began. So when we speak of the beginning of all civilizations, they all began in a central place. That central place is what we all know as the cradle of mankind. So this is something that, like, as I'm saying it to you, you already know it, so you're realizing it, because that's the reality. You just realize it. I can't tell you anything new. I can just make you realize certain things, because it's reality. So Egypt and Alexander, maintained by his successors. Because of these cultural and language tensions challenged Jewish faith and tradition, Sirach sought to show the importance of following God's teaching in the Torah. He wanted his people to realize the enormous gift God had given them, which is true wisdom. This book, originally called Sirach, is thus a kind of wisdom handbook covering a wide range of subjects and representing a variety of literary forms, ethical, moral, and practical maxims, proverbs, hymns, prayers, lists, poetic narratives, and even autobiography. So, as people who are looking for true wisdom, we search in places like this book. We search in places like the the Garden of Eden, where we have what we call the Tree of Life, right? And we also look in different literary forms, which cover areas such as ethics, right? Areas such as morals, maxims. We speak in proverbs, we speak in hymns, we speak in prayers, we have lists, all right? We're goal oriented, which means we're gold oriented, which is God oriented, which is the name of God, which is Jesus. We speak in poems, we read narratives, we hear narratives, we understand narratives. This is a script or scripture. Like when you see the book of Acts, we'll see the actions of Paul, of Saul, of transformation, of healing, of all of those things. Those are narratives. And even autobiographies. The whole book is an autobiography of you, of me, of God, of Jesus. This is one person, but it's all persons. It's the body of Christ. That's the autobiography, which is the autochthon, which is the ground, which is the earth, which is life, which is nature. The KJV also included the much later prologue of Athanasius, called an explanatory introduction in this edition. In the 3rd century AD, in the Western Church, the Book of Sirach came to be called Ecclesiasticus, the church book, suggestive of its significance for use as a manual for social ethics in the early church. So Ecclesiastes, this is where we get Ecclesiasticus, but these are two separate books. However, they're both in the family of wisdom literature. Sirach is the last in the line of great wisdom collections, a worthy successor of those included in the Hebrew Bible, such as Job, Proverbs, and Ecclesiastes. The brief epistle of James in the New Testament, with its wisdom style and content, also continues this tradition of instructing the faithful in right living. Also, the book of the Songs of Solomon, Lamentations, and Psalms. These are very, very wise books. Yeah, Lamentations as well. So Lamentations also is linked to Jeremiah, which is linked to Baruch. But Lamentations is more prophetic. But I also see the wisdom in it. But every book has wisdom in it. But those books are very key in understanding wisdom, which is basically Psalms, James, Job, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Songs of Solomon. So the outline of this book starts with the prologue, which we're going to read just now, and the translator explains as the intentions. So this is what we're going to go over. But the bulk of the book is about the wisdom and the fear of the Lord, study wisdom and obey God, finding wisdom, prosperity and contentment, wise people, sinners, fools, wisdom, family and friends, wisdom and faithfulness to God, wisdom and the blessings come from God the Creator, hymn of praise to Israel's famed ancestors, author, blessing, and concluding prayer. This is amazing. It also speaks about the ancestors, which is a recurring theme in the apocryphal books, because Africans always revere their ancestors as Jews do. You know, I pray to the God of Abraham. That's an ancestor. So this progeny, the progenitor has always been the apex focal point of every African spirituality. So when we have religion, it now takes that away from the actual people who practice the actual spirituality and saying, no, ancestor worship is bad. You don't worship ancestors, but you show that they are worthy. So this is how we also translate our own wealth or our own worth, because having an understanding, if I am an American, if I have an understanding of Benjamin Franklin, and I believe that he did great things, I'm going to draw on that energy, and that is going to give me wealth and worthiness. So this is just how we understand our ancestors. So this is how in Maccabees, the book is speaking about how you have to always holler the name of the ancestors. This is a great thing. and you have to know what is pleasing to your ancestors. And this is what this Bible speaks of, and this is what we are talking about in terms of true wisdom. So this is one of the biggest books on wisdom like ever composed, so you have to pay attention, and I think we're gonna have a good time going through it. So here, moving on, this is the prologue, which is an explanatory introduction. So now we're going to get into the introduction that was given by the compiler of this book. All right. So this Jesus was the son of Sirach and grandchild to Jesus of the same name with him. So this man therefore lived in the latter times, after the people had been led away captive. Okay, so he was living after the Jews were captured by the Roman empires, which came from this love, which is Romance empires. They loved the wisdom of Africa. This woman, and this woman has been romanticized in the Roman Catholic Church as Mary Magdalene, or Mary the Mother of God, and all of that. So when we speak about this romance, it actually traces all the way in the future into the Revelation when we see the whore of Babylon. So they babble about this type of understanding, true wisdom. So this is coming from Alexander, who conquered, who was Greek, but the Greeks transferred everything to the Romans. They are actually the same lineage, the same line, and this is explored in another video. There's another video, Table of Nations, or all of the families on the earth, or something along those lines, which speaks of these different nations, where they came from, and I show their family trees. So this man lived. So this compiler wrote this after they were the people were captive and called home again, and almost after all the prophets. Now his grandfather Jesus, as he himself witnessed, was a man of great diligence and wisdom among the Hebrews, who did not only gather the grave and short sentences of wise men that had been before him, but himself also uttered some of his own, full of much understanding and wisdom. So his grandfather, who was Jesus, right, who he saw, was always diligently looking for this wisdom stuff. Like, yeah, I need more. Like, where can I get more of wisdom? And he would gather all of these short sentences. So this is what you should also start doing. Whenever you hear something, you have to compile it. This is how you actually direct your intention to give attention to wisdom, to her, because she's always speaking. So this is why in Proverbs chapter 8, wisdom is like, I'm always shouting everywhere at the high points. I'm by your door. I am under you. I am everywhere. So this is why you have to pay attention to hear. And when you hear, you learn, and you gain the precepts. When you learn, you earn. So that's a precept. So capio, which is precept, like accept, when you receive. The same sept is the precept, and the same sept is the incept. So this is when you understand, when they're making all of those movies like Inception, what they're doing is inserting precepts. So we're using these spiritual precepts, and the battle is in the is in the fourth dimension. It is in the other realm where precepts work. You can't use your physical hands, you use precepts. So this is what this grandfather Jesus was doing. Okay? And Jesus, who wrote this book, saw it. And Jesus also uttered some of his own stuff. So this is a precept. So when you have this, you will begin to prophesy, you begin to profit. Because it's a precept. You earn, you receive, so you profit. When you profit, you're prophesying. So these prophecies from Jesus come through this way. So this is why it's important to understand when we read this book, which is the book that is called Ecclesiasticus, which is the book of the church. It is a book that is likened to Ecclesiastes. So to a person who would hear this, if you say Ecclesiasticus, they will hear Ecclesiastes. You could have a conversation with someone thinking like, no, you mean Ecclesiastes, and say no. Like the way that we have been so altered in terms of the inception, it is, you could speak to someone and say, no, I'm talking about Ecclesiasticus, the book in the Bible. And the person would be like, yes, I know it. You're talking about Ecclesiastes. No, Ecclesiasticus. So these things happen, you know. But then whenever these things happen, it means that there's a breakthrough. It means that there's a huge chemical reaction that is only charged with love. This is charity, all right? This is when you earn more because you're learning more. Charity. Charity is giving. This is the fruit of the Spirit, and this is a whole other topic. But when you know this, right, he knew this. Now, his grandfather Jesus, as he himself witnessed, was a man of great diligence. All right, diligence is very important. So moving on. When, as therefore, the first Jesus died, leaving this book almost perfected, Sirach, his son, receiving it after him, left it to his own son Jesus, who, having gotten it into his hands, compiled it all orderly into one volume and called it Wisdom, entitling it both by his own name, his father's name, and his grandfather's, alluring the hearer by the very name of wisdom, to have a greater love to the study of this book. So this is why we have to have an introduction to this book. And this introduction is as powerful as the book itself. Because when we understand that the person who wrote it is called Jesus, his father is called Jesus, the father of that father is called Jesus, which is 3 generations, which is the Father, the Son, and the voice, right? Which is Jesus, which is a trinity in itself, which is speaking about the ancestors. And this book is speaking about the ancestors. And when we read the Bible, we hear Paul saying that Jesus is God manifest as wisdom. So when we read the Bible in its entirety and we hear that Jesus is wisdom, and we hear the book of wisdom written by Jesus, or we hear that Jesus is the wisdom in the book, this is how we understand the integrity of the text. And this is why this introduction, this primer, if you will, to the wisdom of the church, to the wisdom of Jesus, is very important. And another thing is that there are a lot of references that Jesus of Nazareth made. Jesus, who was manifest on earth. There are a lot of references that he made that are like word for word, kind of the idea for idea, with the precepts and the concepts that are in this book. And we're gonna go over those as we come across them, going through this book and seeing them in parallel relation and knowing why they're parables in and of themselves. But that is why wisdom has to be found, and it can only be found in this book. It can only be found in you, you know, because it's not trapped in a book. You already have that wisdom infused in you, but you finding it here means that you're on a path of knowledge, understanding, and diligence, patience, learning. It means that there's some prophecy or some profiting that you have to do, because in all labor there is a profit. So in laboring to find this, in laboring to hear this, in laboring to read this, in laboring being here in and of itself means that there's a prophecy in you, there's a profiting in you, and this is going to be unveiled through wisdom or Jesus, right? So it's an interesting correlation, the name of Jesus with the wisdom of God. So let's continue. It contains therefore wise sayings, dark sentences, and parables, and certain particular ancient godly stories of men that pleased God. Also his prayer and song, moreover, what benefits God had vouchsafed his people, and what plagues he had heaped upon their enemies. So this was speaking about the things that were happening in his time and the things that are still happening in this time, because the words of God are timeless. So this Jesus did imitate Solomon, who was no less famous for wisdom and learning, both being indeed a man of great learning, and so reputed also. So this Jesus admired Solomon. And when we admire Solomon, we also have to admire the people who admire Solomon, because if they're able to identify the wisdom in Solomon, it means that they, in and of themselves, are attracted to light. They are attracted to light. So when we see that, when we see like the true light, which is God, the Father of lights, and this is in the book of James, and James is also a wisdom book. So when we speak of light, this is what we're speaking of, and not the false light. We're speaking of the true Father of light. So when we see those people who are attracted to Solomon, and as this says, this Jesus imitated Solomon. So he was also imitating Solomon. He was trying to be wise. Because this is all we can do. We can only try to be wise. For none is righteous, right? But we can only try. Solomon tried. He could not even fulfill everything. So we can't expect the same from Jesus, right? Jesus Sirach. And when we see people like the Queen of Sheba, pay attention to the Queen of Sheba. Because when we understand the Queen of Sheba, we understand wisdom. We understand the people who are attracted to wisdom, who hear wisdom calling. And wisdom is a woman. And this woman went to see the king. And this woman was a queen. And don't tell me after knowing of Queen Sheba, understanding this queen of spice, auspicious, allspice, AU gold, auspicious spice. This is the Queen of Sheba. She brought more spices to that land than have ever been there before. And she wasn't from India, but she brought more spice, auspice, spicy. So this queen, so after knowing Queen Sheba, you know the Bible is not misogynistic or anything like that. It is an interpretation that you need to understand. It is a precept, but the inception is deep in so many people that they're not able to even understand. When you stay that, just read it yourself, and it will speak to you. This is the one book that does that. When you read it, it starts talking. It starts talking. When you read it, it starts talking. So yeah, just like how this is happening right now, you're reading these words, but they're just talking. This is the voice. This is the spirit. This is how it works. So the prologue, both being indeed a man of great learning and so reputed also. This Jesus did imitate Solomon, no less famous for wisdom and learning, but being indeed a man of great learning and so reputed also. So the people who admired Solomon also obviously admired this man, the same way that if Job and Solomon were in the same era, they would also probably be mutually affectionate because they have the same light, which is God, which is love, which is wisdom. The prologue of the wisdom of Jesus, the son of Sirach. Whereas many and great things have been delivered unto us by the law and the prophets, and by others that have followed their steps, for the which things Israel ought to be commended for learning and wisdom, and whereof not only the readers must needs become skillful themselves, but also they desire to learn, be able to profit them which are without, both by speaking and writing. My grandfather Jesus, when he had much given himself to the reading of the law and the prophets and other books of our fathers, and had gotten therein good judgment, was drawn also himself to write something pertaining to learning and wisdom. So he says that books of our fathers, right? And when we speak of our fathers, these are ancestors, and had gotten there in good judgment, was drawn on also himself to write something pertaining to learning and wisdom. So when you understand wisdom, it will speak to you. And he was the father was also drawn to write these things, who was learning. So in fact, I'm gonna read this again because it's a very long sentence. There are not a lot of full stops in what Jesus, the son of Sirach, has to say. So this is him speaking, all right? And the rest of the book is Jesus speaking, but it is the grandfather, maybe even the father, and maybe even the son, right? So here, when we read this prologue, which is very different from the explanatory introduction, which is also different from the introduction. This is why this book is insane. There's an introduction, right? We read the introduction, right? And now we're at an explanatory introduction, right? After this, there's a prologue. So there's also this process that if you want to understand this, you have to understand this. So I'm going to read the prologue again, starting from the beginning, so that we get this, because this is true wisdom. This is important. This is something that can't be rushed. As much as I would love to make this like 5-minute video so that you can go back to your regular schedule programming, but this cannot be rushed. Okay, this is life. This is life. This is death. This book speaks of the blessings. It speaks of the curses, the benefits God had vouchsafed his people, and the plagues he heaped upon their enemies. All right, this book is powerful. It's speaking about things like that. Speaking about inception, perception. All right, precepts. All right, oppression, depression, impression. All right, so whereas many and great things have been delivered unto us by the law and the prophets. Already, this person has read the Torah and the prophets. So this person is already well versed in everything Judean. And now, when we speak of Israel in the next few sentences, we're not speaking of a place that is the state of Israel. We're speaking of a person. We're speaking of Jacob. So this person is everywhere. He's not in a state. So the state of Israel, what we now call Palestine, that's a state of mind and the state of the world. No peace in the Middle East until. That is the status quo. Can you change that status quo? That status quo has been written since forever. So when we speak of Israel, remember that there's a double speak meaning. Israel, his light, the El, the Elohim, the light, which is God the Father of light, which is light, which is energy, frequency, which is the path, the math, everything, which is 1, 2, 3, the Trinity, right? Which is everything, right? So whereas in many and great things have been delivered unto us by the law, so the law and the prophets. So he's read Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Isaiah, Obadiah, Nehemiah, Ezra, perhaps all of those, right? But Ezra is not the prophet, yeah. But then he's read all of those, and by others that have followed their steps, for which things Israel ought to be commended for learning and wisdom. So again, when we speak of Israel, what we're speaking is what we're speaking of in this time. This is written when the Greeks were starting to invade Africa and other regions. So when we're speaking of this, this is when they were taken into captivity by the Greeks. And you can read this more in the Maccabees book. It speaks about Alexander, and it speaks about everything he did. Speaks about everything he did. You can read this in the Maccabees. You can read this in Tobit. I think there's also some reference to this stuff. But it speaks of Israel. And when we look into Africa, we look in Ethiopia, we look in Congo, we look in West Africa, we look in Zimbabwe, we look in Namibia, we look everywhere we look in Africa, there is a tribe of Jews. So it's speaking about those Israelites, right? And those Israelites ought to be commended for learning and wisdom. It's speaking about those Israelites scattered in Haiti, scattered in Peru. Israelites are there. The remnants that were scattered, that are on the island in Jamaica now, that are trapped on the continent in Australia, that are trapped in the US, right? Speaking about, they have to be commended for learning and wisdom. Because once you have the knowledge, because it is the knowledge that sets you free from that captivity, wherever you are. Once you have the knowledge, you are enlightened. They have tainted the word enlightenment. These people who call themselves enlightened, Illuminati, right? They have tainted that word because the prince of darkness came masquerading as light. So they have tainted the very light itself. This very light is what we now say, like all of those, the light is now the media or the medium. It's in between us. The light comes in between us and the tree that I'm looking at. I need the light as the medium by which I can see. So the media has tainted how we see the world. All of these computers and everything, they've tainted how we see the world. And through this media, which is a spirit medium, the spirit that is directing it is what is provoking what we see. Because if that medium was directed with, so this is the medium, the media. So let me not get off topic, but this is heavy, because this is in the same breath, in the same sentence. We haven't gone over a full stop yet. This is what I'm talking about. This is deep. And whereof not only the readers must needs become skillful themselves. Listen. For which things Israel ought to be commended for learning and wisdom, and whereof not only the readers must needs become skillful themselves. So wisdom is a skill. So when you read this, you need to become skillful for yourself. Skills. 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 Let me show you something. Let me show you something. So this person writing this is a person who saw everything happening. So skill, S-K-I-L. So this is shield. Distinction, discernment, knowledge is a skill. Skill, separate, limit. Skill is to slit, to cut. All right. So you see this, right? So this is what it is. This is what it is. Kill, right? This is to extinguish the life off, to render inoperative, stop, seize, void, terminate, amaze, exceed, stun, incapacitate, use up, waste, right? So this is to here overpower, subdue someone by superior force. So this is to overpower, all right? So this is what we say when we say kill, skill, okay? It's a skill. All right, don't lose me yet. Don't lose me yet. Hear what's going on here. Don't lose me yet. Okay? Execute. All right? And this is what we have. Killer's punishment, capital crimes, okay? But it just means to perform. This is what it means. Execute. Perform. This is exactly what it means. Launch or run. Start, launch, run, open. This is a synonym of kill, all right? So executive, execute. This is outflow. So yeah, there's a very profound meaning to this, but I hope you get the idea. But let me make sure. Let me make sure you really get this. So when you have a skill, right? So you have a skill, which is a capacity to perform, a capacity to do something, right? And this is linked to this word. This is when you take the S, put it at the end, you have kills, skills. So this is what we mean. Like you say someone's killing it, okay? And this is a negative word, right? Because killing is not good. We're not supposed to kill or cow. But what we're supposed to do is live. But what this actually means is execute, all right? Be exact. But this is what we mean, be an executive, all right? Executive. This is execution. So when you say execution, it is carrying something into effect, which is the power of the tongue, which is life, which is death, which is a sword. So everyone put on the full armor of God and pray. Put on the full armor of God and pray. So read that in, is it Galatians or Ephesians 6? The full armor of God. All right, let's actually go to it. All right, no, I don't want to open too many things. I want to stay on track. But then, like, put on. All right, this might be important. This might be important, and I hope it is actually Ephesians 6. Yes, Ephesians 6. I'm hoping. So that you see, you put on the full armor of God. Be obedient, that are your masters, knowing whatsoever good bond, whole armor of God. Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. Right? You have to subdue, you have to kill the devil. You have to subdue the devil. This is the meaning of you being born again or everything like that. This is you living your life in power. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, right? Against powers, against rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Wherefore, take unto you the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand. Oh, yes, 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 yes. So it says to stand. So stand therefore, having your loins girt about with truth, and having on the breastplate of righteousness, and your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace. Above all, taking the shield of faith, wherein you shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked, and take the helmet of salvation and the sword. Again, the sword of the Spirit. So the Spirit, this power, this energy is a skill. A skill. And when we read the acts that happened with this sword, with this spirit, with these words, we see in the book of Acts some people actually got killed because they lied to the spirit. So this spirit is power. And when we speak of Elijah, he used this spirit to kill, okay? Execute, executive, like a chief executive officer. Remember, the government will be on his shoulders. The executive, chief executive officer, all right? So this is the executive branch, which is headed by the president. It is an executive order, right? This is power. This is all that it is. It is power to do good or evil according to knowledge. So, and take the helmet of salvation, the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, praying always with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit, with the word, with the power, with the skill of words. This is an assassin, skilled with words. They kill you with words. Just like how you say fire. That word killed 10,000 people. But because the executive of the army said fire, one word kills 1,000,000. This is what will happen in Revelation. It says that fire will come out of his mouth. His mouth and tongue will be like a sword with fire. Okay? So when he just says fire, the amount of carnage that will happen on a single word. This is the power of a person of God. This is the power of wisdom. Okay? Praying always with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit, and watching whereunto with all perseverance and supplication for all the saints, and for me, that utterance may be given unto me, that I may open my mouth boldly to make known the mystery of the gospel. Mystery being the word of the gospel, for which I am an ambassador in bonds, that I may speak boldly as I ought to speak. And yes, so we read that. So I hope that brings clarity. When we say skills, you have to be skilled, and it will give you power. It says that with wisdom, you ask of him anything, and he'll give it to you. So then again, we're back here. All right. So let's read this and wrap it up. So the prologue. We were commended wisdom of learning. Readers needs to be skillful themselves, but also they that desire to learn, be able to profit them which are without. Okay? If they that desire to learn must be able to profit them which are without. So you have to be giving what you earn, precepts. You have to be a teacher, in other words. You have to be a prophet, to give prophecy, to give profiting. This is all it is. When you profit, other people should prosper. That's it. When you profit, other people should prosper. That is it. When you live like that, you live according to the laws of Zion. When you profit, others should prosper. No one should not prosper. You should not kill anything. So your profiting should be skilled. Get it? So you should overcome the devil by making your profit clean. This is why people like Abraham had like a lot of money. They were profitable. They were profitable. They were skilled. But Abraham killed. He had a whole army of people trained to kill. He, Abraham, wanted to kill his own son so that he could understand the spirit. Yeah, it was crazy. It was crazy. So this is what I'm talking about. Prophet, prophecy. Them which are without, both by speaking and writing. My grandfather Jesus, when he had much given himself to the reading of the law and the prophets and other books of our fathers. Our fathers. This is important. This is what I'm talking about. This is Apocrypha. This is hidden. The books of our fathers. And had gotten therein good judgment. Okay, this gives us judgment. And in Africa, we say matare. Matare. In my language. So a person who hears knows what that is. Judgment is matare, which is conferring with the fathers. Okay. This is the courtroom, which is justice, which is us, like a jury. So this is what you do when you say enter into the courtrooms of heaven. This is in the book of Jeremiah, the first chapter. Read it. It speaks about entering into the courts of heaven. We call this judgment. We call this matare. And the judge has power to execute with words. Okay? This is what it's all about. This is judgment, good judgment. So when you're a man in Africa, you're supposed to go sit around among the men so that you hear their good judgment, you hear their wisdom. This is how Sirach or Jesus was learning everything from his fathers. They were spending in Africa. The men are responsible for educating the children as well as the women. Everything in the Ubuntu understanding, which is do unto others as you want them to do unto you. This is where it comes from. This Ubuntu understanding, it is so all encompassing that I can't even begin to go into it. But then it is the golden rule: do unto others. Ubuntu means to be a person through other people. So it is so simple. Like I have just explained it as well as anyone else can. To be a person through other people. Peopling people. That's it. Ubuntu. So good judgment comes through that. So the books of our fathers, and had gotten there in good judgment, was drawn on also himself to write something pertaining to learning and wisdom, to the intent that those which are desirous to learn and are addicted to these things might profit much more in living according to the law. So this is written for addicts. If you're addicted to the Spirit of God, this sounds like something that's like lame to be addicted to. Like saying, yeah, I'm a Jesus freak or something. It sounds so lame, cringeworthy, right? That's what we say, cringeworthy. But if you're addicted to this wisdom, addicted to this power, this is a whole other realm. Like you're caught up in the third heavens where power is unlimitless. You can walk on water. You can feed anyone. There's enough money. You can go on these chariots. You can wake up dead people. You can heal anyone. You can write anything. You can know everything. You can have anything. Like this unlimitlessness is only limited by your imagination. But this is what Jesus meant. Like, you will do greater things than I have shown you. But this is an addiction, when you're addicted to that. So this is, in my opinion, this is linked to Israel, which is when Jacob turned into Israel, which was at a place called Peniel. So this is linked to your understanding in the pineal, and I have a video just specifically on that encounter. So it's speaking about that. So my prophecy, much more living according to the law. So you prophesy according to the laws of God. Whereof, let me entreat you to read it with favor and attention, and to pardon us, wherein we may seem to come short of some words, which we have labored to interpret. For the same things uttered in Hebrew and translated into another tongue have not the same force in them. And not only these things, but the law itself and the prophets and the rest of the books have no small difference when they are spoken in their own language. For in the 8th and 13th year, coming into Egypt, when Eurygates was king, and continuing there some time, I found a book of no small learning. Therefore, I thought it most necessary for me to bestow some diligence and travail to interpret it, using great watchfulness and skill in that space to bring the book to an end, and set it forth for them also, which in a strange country are willing to learn, being prepared before in manners to live after the law. So this is a message that is to your strange country, coming straight out of Egypt. This Pharaoh also, like, he's actually confirmed he lived, like, everything checks out in this book, and this is why we don't actually know it. So yes, this is an introduction into this book, and this is a very important book to a biblical scholar. But not only that, you have to understand what it is. Substantiate it. Substantiate. Under is substand is stance. Substantiate. Understanding. So this is what we've been doing, substantiating according to reality, so that we realize the truth. And this is where we are. So this is very important for any person who is engaged in learning. But understand that it is also translated, all right? So you have to translate it, especially in your strange country, wherever. So it's written to people in a strange country who are willing to learn. So in your strange country, make sure you translate it, all right? And this is my message to you. So thanks a lot for this, okay? So later we'll go. Yeah, so this actually ran like pretty long. All right, so peace out.